everyone, and welcome to the Future of Training, a podcast brought to you by Train for Success and McGraw Hill. Today, we're meeting a profile from Capilano University here in Vancouver, British Columbia. Tara Dabiri is a manager of learning and development, focused on developing strategies for alignment with the university's goals, leadership development initiatives, and performance tracking. She is a chartered professional in human resources and has done a lot of project management. Welcome, Tara. We're so happy to have you in our podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm very happy to be here.
We're so glad we can make this interview happen. So to kick it off, could you tell us a little bit more about you?
Okay. So I moved to Canada 20 years ago from Dubai, and I was born in Iran, raised a little bit in Dubai, and moved to Canada. And I'd always wanted to do something with business, and I didn't quite know what it was. So as a curious student, I spent a lot of time circling, taking all the different business courses that Douglas College had to offer, to the point that they told me I should make a decision and graduate already. And I jumped into human resources at KPU because I really love working with people and the connection and understanding, what's going on in the human mind and how can I help people show up just to be able to do their work in a safe and comfortable environment. And so that kind of started my HR career. And I have jumped between different roles from talent acquisition to people operations to learning and development. I started my own consulting company. I got into deeper and deeper into learning and development, and just my own personal development as well has led me to this role. And it's been really exciting to now create programs and watch leaders feel better equipped with how to manage, the day-to-day stuff and challenges with dealing with other humans.
That's so interesting. Honestly, when I first met you, I was so impressed with how broad your profile is, and I just wanted to know more about you. So jumping into the professional side, what have you learned in the position that you are in right now?
Staying curious and open. So one of the biggest things is when I accepted this role, I looked at the job description. I thought, okay, I know how to do these things. I've done it in different industries. This is great. And then very quickly, I realized that academia is a beast of its own. And just because something works in, let's say, the tech industry doesn't necessarily mean that it would be the right fit for this industry. It might be, but it might need to be massaged and delivered differently or different pace and whatnot. So really staying curious to learn about what is happening in this environment, asking all the questions, not jumping into becoming solution focused first, just staying curious to gather all the information and then eventually leading up with a solution.
Educational institutions have to be so different from other industries, as you're saying. Going more into what you do, project management, how do you apply it to HR?
Yeah, it's got a little bit of a cookie cutter formula when it comes to project management. In my previous roles, I was always curious about doing more outside of my job description. So I always took on extra projects without having the framework of project management in my back pocket. But over the years, I've realized it's really the same rinse, repeat framework, and you just have to adapt it to the environment that you're in and the people that you're working with. But essentially, you always start with a needs analysis. You want to understand, what am I here? What am I trying to figure out? What's going on? So in this context of the university, I have leaders coming in. They've heard that there's a new learning and development department, super excited, tap in, and they need training yesterday. So instead of rolling up my sleeves to say, okay, let's do it, I want to understand what's the actual core need, what's happening for them. And I typically do that through understanding the environment. So asking a lot of questions, doing a little bit of interviewing informally to understand what's going on, to get to the real root cause of what's happening. That will then help inform what I need to do next. But with the needs analysis, it starts with gathering information from everyone. It's not just one source of contact that this is a problem. I want to make sure that it is across the board. And what are the pain points to make sure that the learning objectives are very much aligned to that core problem. Once you figure out your needs analysis, then you need to figure out who's going to work with you on the project. So identifying those people that are going to help move it forward, who's going to be the responsible one, the accountable one. I typically use the RACI matrix. And that way we all know what's happening before the project has kicked off, and as well as a timeline. So I put together a project timeline with the date, the times, when are we going to be meeting, when are the checkpoints, just to make sure that everyone is fully aligned before the project is actually kicked off. And if there are any issues, we address that right away. I don't know if I'm giving you way too much detail into project management right now, or
It's great. I think it's great. Yeah, it totally is helping. I mean, like, going step by step, there must be leaders or clients that come to you and think they know what they need. So they basically tell you, oh, just develop it. So you go further than that and you kind of reteach them to think about the problem so they can redefine what it is and actually understand and be sure that they know what the actual need is, so you can give them a solution that actually solves their problems.
Absolutely. I find that, again, staying curious in every aspect of my life, I apply it whenever and wherever I can when I'm aware to it. It's the same thing when it comes to these type of requests. So staying curious to understand what's the underlying issue that's at hand. And a lot of the times people think that training is the answer, but it might not be. It might actually just be a conflict resolution, and you might just need to have a difficult conversation. And that's it. Instead of throwing someone into a training program because as a leader, you don't want to have that conversation. So you're hoping that training will fix it. So it's really understanding what's going on. And also, we're all busy. We don't want to spend all day, every day in training sessions, especially as adult learners. We want to take that one bit, bite size, whatever that is, and then be able to apply it right away. Making sure the learning objectives or whatever it is that you're trying to get the user to learn is exactly capturing that root problem so that they can go and apply in whatever it is.
And you mentioned you needing to recognize who the key actors in each step are going to be. So does that change throughout the time? There's like someone from this area for the beginning and there's someone from this area for the ending or something like that? Or is there just one person?
It really depends. So in my private practice, what I've done is before I accept a project from a client, I ask them like who's going to be, the project sign off. So I can, as a consultant, come up with all of these requirements and recommendations, but who at the end of the day is going to say yes or no to that solution? So right off the bat, I need to know who that person is and then who's going to be working on the project along with me. So one of the work that I did was a competency framework. That one required multiple people's involvement at different points. And the project lead needed to sign off on that to identify those people so that they were also talked to. So when that time came, they knew what was expected of them and how they were being held accountable. And then there are people that you just need to consult with. So for example, if you're rolling out a project and IT needs to be involved, maybe IT is not part of your project but you might need to consult with them. Or your program might be touching something else. So right now at CapU, it's a unionized environment. And I make sure to talk to our labor relations team to make sure that I'm not crossing anything that I don't know, or if there's any history I need to know. So again, you identify the people that you would want to consult with, or also the people that you want to inform with. So the executive team is a team that I always have to inform on the work that I'm doing so they know what's happening. And then they can roll it out and be the champions of that work too. So lots of thought goes in the project planning. And I think a lot of people miss this step. We just kind of roll up our sleeve and jump into the project. But then you realize you might be working in silo. Your approach might be just the one approach that you've thought about. I always, from a personal aspect, I get into very fun arguments with my mom when she tries to tell me, do life this way, honey, like do it this way. Like I know this path. And I like to tell her like there are an infinite amount of paths that you can take in this world. And you've walked down one path and that's worked for you and that's fantastic. But there are also like a 1,000 that you haven't explored. And that doesn't mean it's the right path or the wrong path. So same with the solution. When a leader comes up and says, I need this training, that's one solution we've identified, but let's keep talking and see how much more we can kind of unpack here and see what's the best solution based on what we've kind of unpacked here.
I see. I mean, it's teamwork. You basically become part of the team for that moment and are involved in their conversation and in their problem, and you just get into the problem so you can actually know how to solve it. That's great. And
Yeah.
you mentioned basically there's a lot of information involved. You mentioned that you like to have the dates set up so you know when to get to each deadline. You need the people that you're supposed to contact at every point to understand, to check if everything's good, if you're not overstepping and everything. That seems like a lot of coordination. I just an individual that does this has to be very organized to move these projects along. Um, I assume I can tell it's a challenge for anybody to run a project. So you are like a project manager. What are other challenges that you typically face when you start one, and how do you overcome them?
I think getting everyone in alignment is one of the first obstacles. I wouldn't even say like a full blown challenge, but it's just an obstacle. You have a lot of different opinions, different thoughts, different working styles, different communication styles. So getting everyone aligned and then setting the tone on how we're going to move forward and making sure that everyone is carrying the weight forward is really important. But I think one of the biggest pieces that gets missed in projects is typically the change management aspect. So you can create the best program and put it out, and if no one is actually taking it, then all your efforts have gone sideways. So really recognizing that change management needs to be woven into the work that you're doing. Communication needs to be woven in so that you are raising awareness to what's happening. You're explaining the why. I always lead with explaining the why. I think as human beings, we need to know what's happening and why it's happening so then that we can align ourselves to that vision. So weaving that information through and showing the impact of the work in early days is really going to go far when you are actually going to get to that rollout point. But I think a lot of the times what I've seen in organizations is that it stays siloed. Someone's quietly working away on a project and they're seeing things from their lens, like from their specific lens on how the solution would work, but sometimes you don't factor in the others or what else is happening on the outside of you. So if I'm rolling out a program, it's important for me to know what's happening in the university as well. So I'm not bombarding people with too many things, right? And then the adaptation rate decreases. So keeping all of these things in mind and working through it is really, really important for the program to be successful.
A bit more of a specific question. So you mentioned that yes, there's people that could be working a project and then there's a silo effect and they just don't see anything else. So they don't actually know what's happening on the rest of the organization. You need to involve other area. How do you recognize which areas need to be trained or who needs to be involved? I guess it's a hard question because it really depends on the case, but how do you know who needs to work? Who needs to put in the work?
Yeah, when it comes to this is where the RACI method comes in, that I was mentioning earlier. So if you're talking about program design, RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. So I use those 4 buckets at the very beginning of any kind of project that I'm creating to say who will be responsible for this, who's actually like getting their hands dirty in the work. And that might be, the different departments, different team members. It might just be one person. So you kind of work through that ahead of time. Then who is accountable? So at the end of the day, if everything fails, who's that project lead that's taking this forward? And failing is not not from like such a negative lens, but whose name is going to be attached to this project for the success of the team? Like who's the leader of this team? And then the C is for consult. So again, who would you want to talk to make sure that you're getting information that, for example, the labor relations team that I might not know much about the unionized environment, they do, so I can consult with them, show them my approach. They can give me some feedback. I can incorporate that feedback. And the last one's the inform, which is letting people know that this is happening. And it's typically executives. If it's company-wide, it would be the employees, whoever that audience is typically. Or if it's going to impact someone, but they don't need to take any action, sometimes that would be an inform. So identifying those pieces very, very early on is really important. And then I typically have a project kickoff meeting with those people to say, you've been invited. This is the role. This is the expectation. This timeline. Is everyone in alignment? And then I would start something so that there's no surprises at the end of the day.
Great. So your work is very it's very cohesive, and you like take do you take people from different areas and make them like on these meetings, on these workshops, do you make them work together? Do they come together and do that, or do you separate them by specialty? How is that?
It depends on the project. So, in the past, when I've done the competency framework, we needed the top executives of the company to identify something. So we did a working group with them. So, you had the marketing executive, you had the HR executive, so you had all of them in one room working through it. Next, we had, the IT team. So different level positions were in that conversation. So we're getting a wider range of perspective into the conversation. But I wouldn't say you need to involve that many people at all times. It really depends on the project. Right now, I am doing performance appraisals at CapU, and I wouldn't say I'm involving too many groups. It's really myself, the communications team, the vendor, and then two other people that are getting this done, and it's impacting our two big groups of our university. But also making sure that I'm informing the HR team of everything that's happening because it's connected to everyone else's work is important.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally see that. How do you once you start working and designing these programs, there's a lot of, I imagine, other like follow-up workshop sessions and a lot of little lessons that I guess they have to learn so they can make this progress in knowledge. How do you get these knowledge to stick to them? How do you make them actually learn from it?
Yeah, great question. So it really comes down to when I'm putting like the program together, whatever that program is, the very first thing I need to know is like the purpose. So every learning program needs to have a very clear purpose and what change do we want to see from that learner? Because without this, you will have that lack of direction. And your approach really is impacted by this. Next, you want to understand who your learners are. So adults learn differently than children. They bring their own experiences. We're all self-motivated. We've learned some things that we want to bring to the table, and we also want to learn it now, and we want to apply it right now. So keeping these things in mind, you want to design your program so that it resonates, because as we talked about this, you will lose interest very quickly if something is not resonating, or if I'm going off on a tangent that doesn't connect, you might just pick up your phone and start checking your Instagram. Next, you have your content. So you want to make sure that the material that you're putting out to the learner is directly, again, tied to your learning objectives and it's relevant. The relevancy piece really captures the essence of what you're trying to teach and captures the learner's attention. Because again, people will tune out and it's just standard human nature. Then you look at the delivery aspect. The delivery is really crucial. So you have to think through like, how will these learners learn best? Is it going to be hands-on? Is it going to be group discussion? Should it be hybrid? Should it be in person? Again, depends on what you're trying to teach and your own teaching style and also the environment of the world. 2020, we all had to adapt to a hybrid, not even a hybrid model, to an online model, remote model, and learning how do we engage with learners when our attention spans are so limited. And then you're staring at a screen for 8 hours. And I was in programs that were like 5 weeks long, every day, all day, 8 hours. Like, how do you keep these people engaged, right? So thinking through the delivery, and then that ties right into the engagement. So making sure that your adult learners are actively participating, not just passively listening. Giving lectures online. I don't know about you, but webinars, if that I'm not participating in, I just tune out. As much as I'm so excited about the topic, it just doesn't stick the way that if I'm put into a workshop and I'm doing role play, and while role play is super uncomfortable and everyone hates it, I am being challenged. Do you know what I mean? So the engagement's really important. And then to your last point of how do we learn those minor lessons and keep evolving is making sure you're assessing and gathering feedback. So those check-ins with the learners to make sure that did they understand it, and asking them for feedback so that you can continue tweaking your programs is really important. Because with learning programs, it's never really finished. Like, you can never put something on a shelf because it'll get outdated and processes will change, policies will change, just like your cell phone that gets software updates all the time. It's the same concept of these programs if you want to keep them relevant. So making sure you're making those quick little tweaks as feedback is provided and impacting it for your next round of whatever it is keeps the work relevant and alive.
Yes, I mean, if people keep changing every day, it makes sense that the way we teach them also has to change. Otherwise,
Exactly.
forgotten.
Exactly.
Well, that's great. I assume that also with different projects, there's different strategies of how often you engage into these teaching. I assume maybe there's some projects that are like everyday training or day-to-day integrated into the job, and then there's maybe other projects where there's a one-off workshop, although maybe that goes literally against what you said. Maybe one-off workshops are not useful enough. What do you think about that?
I love one-off workshop. I think it depends. It's just-in-time training on what's happening. So for example, with performance appraisal, we did the goal setting, and then the second phase was mid-year check-ins, and we heard that leaders weren't comfortable with having hard conversations. So to accompany that, I did a little workshop on difficult conversations for leaders so that it would supplement their learning. And because it's a one-off workshop, I can bring it back in around the year end. If they're going to have another difficult conversation potentially, let's feed that workshop back in and get them to practice again. And it's a 2-hour, 3-hour, get them into role plays, get them into activities, case studies, whatever that is, and then have them get prepared just in time. They have to go and have these conversations. So I think workshops are great. I think that, again, it captures the right amount of attention span. And if you design the program right, the workshop properly, you'll definitely gain a lot of value out of that.
It's great. I do agree with that. Going into how to prove people that this works and that the projects work, how do you measure this success? I guess you mentioned before that you need that constant feedback, but I guess I was wondering more of people love to talk about KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any KPIs that you're like, yes, this is very important to recognize so people can look at the numbers and also agree with what everybody else is saying?
Great question. I think the KPIs really come down to what's the learning objective here, what's happening. So certain things currently, our goal is just to increase participation rate. So I just keep track on the numbers of, when I first started, how often were we putting out this workshop and what were the numbers and how am I increasing that participation rate? Sometimes things are like a prerequisite. So I have my certification for DISC. And for DISC, there's a level 1 and there's a level 2. So level 1 is all about your self-awareness and how do I show up in the world, in the workplace and whatnot. And when you complete that, level 2 is your team can go in and have a team DISC. So you look at all the profiles and you see how you work well together. So one of my KPIs was to increase DISC level 1 rates and then target all the teams that were kind of working individually within DISC 1 to target them for DISC 2 to increase our DISC 2 with very strategically aligning communications and whatnot to say, hey, these are all the benefits if you do this from like a team workshop perspective. So something like that. If a leader comes to me and they say they need some sort of training created because there's a problem in the workplace, we typically look at that problem, and sometimes that can feed into a metric that we want to use for the learning objective to say, okay, at the beginning, how do we feel about this? What do we think our knowledge was based on 0 to 5, whatever you want to add a scale to? And then sometimes at the end of that same workshop, I say, now that you've finished this workshop, how would you rate your ability, your knowledge, whatever it is that we're measuring, and use that as well to feed. Was this work relevant? Did it actually stick? Did it not? And I always ask them for feedback of what else do you need? What other topics would you like to learn from? And that typically I collect that feedback so that it helps me figure out what's next, what the common theme of what everyone is asking for, and how can I align myself to be able to offer those programs.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell that you know how to cater to them because you actually work learning about them, everything, like as much as you can. So you both are learning, both sides are learning from each other.
I think you're forever going to learn. Yeah, I don't think it ever ends.
True. That's
yeah,
so true. Um, Going back to the beginning when you mentioned there were a lot of a lot of things in project management that you have to track for. You have to track basically the days of when you have to do everything, who you need to talk to. Do you have any tools in particular that help you, or that you would recommend for someone that has a lot of things in a project that they have to manage and they just need to keep track of everything?
Yeah, there's a lot of project plan templates out there that are free. I'm sure you can also throw something in ChatGPT. My mentor gave me a project plan template that I use. I resisted it because it required so much attention to detail. And once you put in one task and you said it was going to take 2 weeks, it would formulate like weeks out. And it was very integrated and it was daunting at first. And I would avoid it and I would work on a piece of paper. Um, but really, at the end, getting yourself organized so all of your information is concise and in one place will really be helpful. And if your brain, or my brain likes to cross things off as I do things, so it's like a little reward system for me. So I like working out of Excel for that reason. So I can say, okay, I did that. Oh, that's falling behind, so I can move it. But there's lots of different project planning tools and templates. I think Asana is one. I just use like standard Excel. It's worked for me so far, but yeah, I would like to upgrade eventually.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm the same way. I literally have like a bunch of post-its on top of my computer because I guess I like the paper and look at everything immediately.
Yeah.
About technology, which I wish I could implement more. What role does technology play in your everyday or in your work? Do you, I don't know, like, do you use any specifically? You mentioned ChatGPT, which I think everybody's going to start using. What role does technology play?
It depends. It depends on the corporation and, what kind of technology is available to them. So if you're specifically speaking from a learning aspect, typically larger organizations will have a learning management system. It's called an LMS. And what this does, it allows you to actually create content online in e-learning modules, for example. So it can be self-serve. And once you build it, you can create, tracking in there as well, attendance. You can have little quizzes in there so that you can test the knowledge of your learner. You can pause, add videos. You can make it interactive. So that is a really great tool. I've used different LMSs over the years. Currently, we don't have one, and that's where I get creative and try to problem solve. And what can I do without that? So right now, I use a lot of PowerPoint, but I use PowerPoint in a way that I can make it more interactive. So I do easy, yay or nay during, workshops. I'm like, put your thumb up if you think this is a goal, or this is true, or this is false, and using different animation to like get them to also play along, or cutting out stuff and having it at their desk so that they can play along with me. Little things go very far.
No, I agree. You agree?
Yeah. And then because we don't have a software that allows me to record, I also use Loom. Loom is a software that you can pretty much do a screen grab and have a voiceover. So I don't know, over the last few years in the different roles that I've had, I've been asked to do my voiceover things. And I never saw anything in it, but I've low-key become like the Morgan Freeman of a few different organizations where you don't see my face, but you hear my voice in the training programs as I walk you through, the slides. So that's another thing that I incorporated here when I realized, okay, our learners can't attend in-person sessions. How can I bring the delivery to them and not have it in a set schedule? Let's make it self-serve. So I went on Loom. I started recording my PowerPoint slides, but changing it so that it's you versus the computer with my voice and talking to it so that you can interact with it at your own time, not with all the bells and whistles of an LMS, but we work with what we have. So those are some of the things, and like quick little demos. So if I can't demo a tool for you, how can I record a quick little video of me demonstrating it and having that as a bite-sized 2-minute video for you so that you don't need to come sit through a 3-hour workshop to get that 10 minutes that you need it. These are some of the things that I do. But yeah, ChatGPT for idea generation sometimes when I'm stuck. It's just myself right now in this role, and sometimes I need someone to bounce ideas off of, and ChatGPT's become my little virtual assistant. Uh, and then, yeah, those are some that comes to mind right now.
Well, that's great. Going on to another question. What room of improvement do you see in the industry right now for the following years, or where do you see it's going? Like, what effect will AI have in the rest of your work? I feel like your work and everybody else's. How do you see the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had like a little mini panic attack when ChatGPT was coming out because I thought, oh my God, my job is over. But I've learned to reframe that and see it just like, when Google came out, I can't even remember when Google came out, but when Google came out, I'm sure people had the same feelings. This is just another extension of that world. And with technology, I always like to jump on board early on and make it my friend versus the enemy. I find with ChatGPT, you can generate a lot of things. You could generate content and whatnot, but it's missing the human aspect. I get recharged when I talk to people, when I'm facilitating workshops, when I'm helping identify issues. And the way that my brain works is you and I can have a conversation and you might have this big, bold idea in your head and you have all these thoughts that you want to put into a program, but you don't know how. And my brain can structure that. I can pull it out through asking you questions and then articulate it back to you and help put that in a framework that makes sense for you so that you can then go off and build that. And ChatGPT might be able to do that. You might have to build up that skill to help it ask you those questions or whatnot. But I think at the end of it, that human element piece is really needed. The partnership, so, utilizing those two together, I think will become your superpower instead of letting it scare you away. But yeah, I'm excited to see what's going to happen with learning out there in the world. On a personal level, I have been going deep into my own personal development is a huge area of focus for me, and it has been for many, many years. And in different areas that keep lighting up is we need to be more intentional about connecting mind, body, spirit, and doing that not just in our personal space, but also in our professional lives. I found that my corporate image didn't have space for that other element, the spirituality piece. And lately, I have been challenging myself of how would I actually want to run this if I run it in the way that I want to. So bringing mindful practices into it. So before actually talking to a leader or diving into a workshop, let's take a few intentional breaths and recenter. And these are things that, again, I do in my personal life, but I don't see room for it in the corporate life for me to, ask the executive team to everyone close your eyes and let's take some deep breaths. And I want to break that. I want to make sure that we're connecting so that we're charged and we're creative together by taking those mindful moments and whatnot. So integrating those pieces of myself that I'm learning in my own healing and growth and development phases, I want to make sure to incorporate that and put that out into the work that I do in the world.
That's amazing. I feel like you're a full human. You try to prioritize every single good aspect, including the spirituality. And I agree with you. I relate, because we as humans are very, like, our spirits are who we are. So we need to give it space for it to grow and not just focus on, okay, I need to earn money so I can live. I need to actually enjoy the part of living. And I think it's great that you integrate that into the corporate world. I feel like in like a few years, we should get back together again and just talk about this and see how it has progressed.
Yeah.
But talking about the future, how do you see yourself in 5 years?
When it comes to my career, it's taken such a different leap than where I thought I would where I would be going. And when I let go of following that 5-10 year plan and leaving room for life to show me what is in store for me, I have been tapping into areas that I didn't necessarily think of, such as learning and development. It was not an area where I woke up and I was like, I want to go do this. But it's it's a very natural skill for me to utilize my brain the way that my brain works. It's very easy to do it. I know where I'm going and I don't know where I'm going. Where I would like in the next 5 years is to create more programs that are more aligned with what what I'm exploring in life that are around the personal development, leadership, spirituality, and well-being pieces. I see it being on stage with people, like lots of people. I see it being international. I see workshops. I'm tapping in a lot into the masculine feminine worlds to understand those energies. So yeah, going down that path and putting out, my own learning into the world to see if someone else can take some sort of lessons out of those as well.
That is great. I think the answer is you're going up. I can tell you're gonna do great at whatever step you take. I think you're gonna do great at it. And well,
Thank you.
I want to thank you so much for accepting our invite into the podcast. I feel like I learned so much about you and your story, and I love your profile. It's amazing. So now is your time. You can shout out to whoever you want or send greetings to anybody that means something to you in this space.
I've had an upbringing where I didn't have family growing up here, like outside of my mom and my sister, and we had to kind of raise ourselves in a new country and whatnot. With life, it's been so beautiful to watch all these souls that have come into my life that have lifted me up at times where I was confused and couldn't see it, and I call them guardian angels. But they've literally come up, they've given me direction, they've given me feedback, they've given me motivation. And they've kind of picked me up when I was too down and told me to keep going, keep my head up, and just focus on what's ahead of me. There's so many of them, and I'm so blessed for it.
Again, thank you. Thank you for being in our interview. I feel like you're a role model for me. And to everybody listening, if you like this episode, please give us a like. If there's any topic specifically that you would like to hear about, please leave us a comment. Rating us in our platforms really helps us to get more people to hear about these amazing profiles, just like Tara. If you have any questions about what we do as Train for Success and want to learn about more about implementing corporate training in your own organization, I would like to invite you to check trainforsuccess.ca. So thank you for listening. Thank you, Tara. And I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you very much.